welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into one of Scotland's most notorious true crime mysteries, the Appin Murder of 1752. But listen, we aren't just going to tick off a list of procedural facts here. More importantly, we're going to focus heavily on the why. Why did this one isolated assassination practically shake an entire nation? Well, to figure that out, we need to go back in time. We're talking about a rugged, unforgiving landscape filled with bitter political divisions, ancient clan loyalties, and a murder that remains officially unsolved over 2.5 centuries later. It's a mystery that really shows us just how far a government will go to crush a rebellion, and honestly, the terrifying weight of state power when it demands a scapegoat. Let's get into it. Oh, I am dead. Take care of yourselves. Now, those dramatic words were spoken on the 14th of May, 1752, and they were the final cries of Colin Roy Campbell, who is widely known across the Highlands as the Red Fox. He was a government agent, specifically the factor tasked with managing the forfeited lands of the Clan Stewart and Clan Cameron. On that fateful afternoon, Campbell was riding through the dense, shadowed wood of Lettermore. He had 3 companions with him, including his own nephew Mungo Campbell and a servant. And then, suddenly, just out of nowhere, a single, devastating shot rings out from the hillside above. Campbell is struck square on the back, he slumps on his horse, yells out that desperate warning to his crew, and dies right there on the dirt trail. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it grounds this whole assassination in absolute physical reality. That stone cairn you see right there, it sits directly on the old road from Ballachulish to Durr, and it marks the exact spot where the Red Fox was ambushed. So, right after that gunshot, his nephew Mungo desperately scans the tree line and spots this solitary figure in dark clothing holding a musket, just sprinting up the steep hill. But the shooter completely vanishes into the rugged terrain. He escapes, leaving behind a mystery that still haunts this incredibly serene Highland landscape today. So why was Colin Roy Campbell targeted in the first place? Let's take a look at the driving force behind this hit. The answer actually comes down to a sacred, foundational Highland concept known as dúthchas. This is a deeply held, centuries-old principle that clan members have an absolute, inalienable right to live on their ancestral clan territory. You know, it wasn't just about renting a pouch of dirt, it was their entire identity. And Colin Campbell wasn't just some government official passing through to collect a few taxes. He was actively orchestrating mass evictions of Clan Stewart members. He was literally tearing families from their homes to replace them with his own Campbell tenants. To the Stewarts, these large-scale clearances were not just a harsh legal maneuver. They were an unforgivable violation of dúthchas. It was a direct threat to their very existence on the land they had bled for over generations. To fully grasp the true why behind this murder, we kind of have to pull back and look at the massive political rift tearing Scotland apart at the time. On one side, you had the Hanoverians. They were supported by the Whigs and clans like the Campbells. Simply put, they were the Loyalists, firmly backing the established British crown and the Protestant succession. On the opposing side were the Jacobites, which included heavily armed clans like the Stewarts and Camerons. They fiercely supported the exiled Stuart monarchy and believed they were the rightful rulers. So you can see, this was way more than a local real estate dispute over Highland farms. It was a bitter, violent, national divide over who rightfully sat on the throne of Great Britain. So when you have Colin Campbell, a Hanoverian factor, using state power to evict Jacobite Stewarts from their own ancestral lands, well, that was just a powder keg waiting for a spark. Let's move to and see how this builds, because these tensions absolutely did not explode overnight. Looking at the timeline, in 1745, the Jacobites rose up in a massive armed rebellion to reclaim the throne, but they were brutally crushed by government forces at the Battle of Culloden in 1746. In the immediate aftermath, the British government basically tried to absolutely dismantle the Highland way of life. They confiscated Jacobite lands and cracked down incredibly hard on the culture to prevent any future uprisings. By the time we reach May 1752, the tension in the Appin region is at a boiling point. The large-scale national war was over, sure, but that localized, desperate resistance to those brutal aftermath policies culminated directly in the Appin murder, which, incredibly swiftly, led to the execution of a key Stuart leader later that exact same year. And this brilliantly illustrates just how deep these political loyalties went, literally right down to the clothes on their backs. If you look at the Stuart of Appin tartan on the left and the red and black MacGregor tartan on the right, you're going to notice they share a distinct pattern known as the Jacobite motif. Now, following the defeat at Culloden, the government actually banned the wearing of tartan entirely through the Act of Prescription. Their goal was to completely crush clan identity and unity. But many Highlanders were so deeply committed to their cause and their heritage that they utterly defied this ban. Wearing these specific tartans became a visual, highly dangerous act of political defiance. The culture itself was resisting the state. Every single thread of woven wool was basically a silent protest. Number 2, I want to highlight the sheer complexity of this crime. You see, modern police analysis of this centuries-old case gives us a really surprising fact. It strongly suggests the assassin likely loaded 2 bullets into a single gun barrel. The first was an accurate shot, and the second was what they call a wanderer, or fir subhail in Scottish Gaelic. And based on the firing angle, the shots likely came from close range, low in a depression. What does that mean? It means that dark figure Mungo saw running up the hill might have just been a clever decoy. This was a highly coordinated hit, not just a random act of violence. Okay, let's dive into this and look at who actually might have pulled this off. Suspect 1 is Alan Breck Stewart, a known fiery Jacobite rebel who was in the immediate area and instantly fled to France right after the shooting. Suspect 2, the victim's own nephew, Mungo Campbell. He ended up inheriting his uncle's highly lucrative job and conveniently took charge of the ensuing investigation, where he used some pretty brutal, excessive force in his interrogations. Then we have Suspect 3, Donald Stewart, reportedly the absolute best marksman in the clan. In fact, his family's oral tradition says he actually had to be physically held down by relatives to stop him from marching into town and confessing. And finally, James of the Glens, the de facto Stewart clan chief. He obviously had the strongest motive, ordering a hit to protect his clan and prevent those impending mass evictions. So the crucial point is the British government didn't necessarily care about finding the real triggerman. They needed a prominent scapegoat to just nip this boiling Highland resistance in the bud immediately. With Alan Breck safely off in France, they arrested James of the Glens. And guys, his trial was a complete and utter sham. It was presided over by the Duke of Argyll, who just happened to be the chief of Clan Campbell, the victim's clan. And unsurprisingly, the jury contained a massive majority of Campbell clansmen. Now, despite compelling trial testimony proving James was miles away with a rock-solid alibi at the time of the murder, he was found guilty in Airts and Parrots. That's a Scottish legal term meaning he was convicted as an accessory before the fact. Basically, the verdict was decided long before he ever stepped foot in that courtroom. So James of the Glens was sentenced to hang. Now, he was widely known as a thoroughly decent, God-fearing Highlander, and standing on the scaffold, protesting his absolute innocence to the very end, he drew upon his deep faith. He actually sang the metrical version of the 35th Psalm in Scottish Gaelic. The words were a direct plea for justice. False witnesses rose, to my charge things I not knew they laid. They to the spoiling of my soul me ill for good repaid. It is just an incredibly moving historical moment, a man facing death with total dignity. To this day, across the Highlands, Psalm 35 is still recognized and revered as the Psalm of James of the Glens. But the government wasn't satisfied with simply taking his life, were they? No, they wanted to send a chilling, unavoidable political message to any other clans even thinking of resisting the clearances. Following his execution at MacPatrick's Narrows, James's body was left hanging in chains right by the busy ferry crossing. And it stayed there for 18 long months. Battered by the harsh Highland wind, the rain, and scavengers, his skeletal remains degraded so much that they eventually had to be held together with wire. It was a gruesome, visceral warning to the entire region. Literally absolute psychological warfare, reminding the locals every single day about the devastating cost of defiance. But, this incredible story didn't just fade away into the mists of history. It leaped directly into popular culture. In 1886, the legendary Scottish author Robert Louis Stevenson wove these exact historical events into his immortal adventure novel, Kidnapped. Stevenson took the real-life flight of suspect Alan Breck Stewart, cleverly tossed in his own fictional protagonist David Balfour as a hidden witness to the Appin Murder, and basically created a literary masterpiece that captured the world's imagination. It's been adapted countless times, like the vibrant Walt Disney movie you see here, keeping the memory, the tension, and the enduring mystery of the Red Fox alive for generations of readers and viewers worldwide. Which brings us to our final thoughts. Even today, the secret of who actually pulled the trigger in the woods of Lettermore is said to be closely guarded by local descendants. James of the Glens went to his grave refusing to name names, standing tall against the might of the state. So we have to ask, was his silence a noble, ultimate sacrifice for clan honor and that sacred principle of duchess? Or was he simply the tragic, inevitable victim of corrupt, rigged politics? It's a question that forces us to reckon with the true, heavy cost of the Appin murder. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.